Got it. Okay. So, welcome back. All right. So I have first. I've got for that project one. I haven't graded. Well, that's not due yet, and I haven't graded all the ones that I have. But the ones that I have looked at have been really good. So I think I'm hoping that and my biggest worry as a professor anytime you have a deliverable is if we get confused about what we're actually doing, that's just frustrating for everybody, right? So at least I feel like I have evidence to the effect that you were able to understand what you're supposed to do, and that what I'm getting is what I'm after. So if you're having anxiety about doing just what I want, I think at least in this case it seems like that's not hopefully going to be a problem. It seems like you just sort of address the 7 questions, you should be good.
Does it help to have a lot of screenshots too? Is that helpful? I mean, of the atlas, so you can actually see what we're looking at?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, I think the assignment specifically asks for, 2 or 3?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I know other people have turned in 5 or 6 pictures. Just, they're talking about here's how this works in my, especially when you get into the neighborhood and say, oh, well, this, he's not here today, but the Winona guy, yeah, he's like, oh, this part of Winona is different in a lot of ways from this part. And then, when you get the nice screenshots of that, it's easier to see. Again, it's not required, but it's easier for me to get the story of what, you're trying to tell stories, so pictures are, 1,000 words sometimes.
I know I'm never moving home again.
Okay. No raising kids or yeah, I know, lesson learned, right? Oh, interesting. I'm trying. So I wanted to. I had a couple specific things as I promised that we would talk about some of the more interesting things that got uncovered. So let's see. So who's my North Dakota person? Yeah, that was really interesting, right? So and I'm trying. Yeah, and what? So was it? Nope. But you did yours. Did yours have the migrant workers that came through? Yeah, that was really interesting. So in the Dakotas, I mean, Dakotas are great for income mobility, right? Just generally. Where you grew up was kind of no exception. But there was this sort of
And why is the Dakotas good for that? Because
Okay, we're running oil and...
they have that.
Yeah, but I think you think about the Midwest generally, where we tend to have better. We spend a lot on education. We don't necessarily get a lot of educational kick for our dollars.
Right.
But it's kind of like if you throw enough money at it, you're going to get a good school, mostly, right? And I think that's true through most of the Midwest. And then there's the social capital factor. So we have a lot of small, tight-knit communities that we just know from the data that that's helpful. I mean, it doesn't solve everything. And there's downsides to that. You get a bunch of busybodies up in your business sometimes, right? If you live in small town Wisconsin or whatever. But again, maybe that's motivating, right? If you're in a giant urban environment where nobody knows, maybe it doesn't, it's a lot easier to bump off a liquor store and hope no one notices or nobody cares. I don't know. I mean, right? We just know that the social capital part matters. And also, I think, right? I mean, to talk about oil and gas, right? Not everybody is going to end up being, a Harvard-educated business master's student, right? There's a lot of people that just have to work regular jobs, and if you're a high school educated person, there's a lot to do in the Dakotas when maybe there's not so much to do other places.
It was super homogenous, so all the factors, down the left-hand column, as I was trying to find things that are different, there was not a lot of income inequality in general, or the other factors, incarceration, high school graduation, whatever. There wasn't a lot of variation at all. I found 2 that were significant, but for the most part, I thought I'd see more difference between the high income and the low income, but there wasn't. So overall income being said, the
Upward
population,
mobility.
upward mobility, yeah.
Was-
That being said, the population is fairly homogeneous. So there were only a couple, like the median household income for child of white parents is 62,000, which was significantly higher than the 44, which is the national. But Hispanic was 40, so that was a really big variation. But there's
That's
a large
really good.
portion of
Yeah.
migrant workers that work the agricultural. So that was a big variation, and then the gender gap was far greater than the national average. So women earning 30% less than men across all categories, as opposed to the national average of 20%.
And I forget what the national average is for Hispanic youth. You know, so that's again, right? So there's this huge drop, but you know, what does it look like relative to the national? But I think it was like
44 was the national for Hispanic.
oh yeah. So I mean, sorry. Then that was kind of the interesting story is that if you're in the Dakotas and you're not Hispanic,
You're worse off.
if you're not Hispanic, you're doing really well, where you
Yeah.
have a lot of upward mobility. But if so it's kind of like even conditional on being Hispanic. If you're Hispanic in this part of the Dakotas, it's like you're not getting the bump that everyone else got. In fact, you're a little bit behind. And right, so then you can speculate. Okay, so why aren't the Hispanic folks that live in this area benefiting from all the things that apparently other North Dakotans get? And right. Then hopefully you would then try to think about what are the things that we know matter, right? So it could be, or if you think about, this is just speculation, right? If you think about a migrant worker family, right, if they keep coming back to the same spot to work the same agricultural careers that their parents and grandparents worked, that's great for family tradition and like social fabric. But we know from looking at the data that a lot of the people who grow up in small towns in Wisconsin that end up experiencing high income mobility aren't experiencing it by staying put.
Correct.
Right? You got to get out to, right? So if your family keeps coming back to the same spot, well, you're not going to benefit from moving to a larger locale and changing careers.
Sure. And if you're working in agriculture and prices or commodities are suppressed or down in price,
Yep.
you may not be making as much money, so that commodity market could greatly affect your income because farmer can't afford to pay you.
Yep. Well, and also too, like, how much are those kids going to benefit from really good schools? If you're bopping around, it's hard, right? It's hard. You can still get educated moving every 3 months, but I think it's just going to end up that it's going to be a challenge to benefit from these like upward mobility amenities
Yeah. The high
with a
school-
migratory lifestyle.
Yeah, the high school graduation rate was 16% lower, and college graduation for Hispanics was not measurable compared to 36%.
Yeah. So and often not measurable means we have so few that you could start identifying individual people, which we're not allowed to do for privacy reasons. So we cut it off and say can't measure it, right? So it just means it's must not be a very large number. So that was a really interesting case study in what we were looking at. And then what was the other one I had to talk about? I don't remember. That's okay. I'll look it up in the break, and I'll introduce it next time. But yeah, there was another sort of interesting, unexpected sort of outcome from another one. But yeah, for those of you that are still working, so again, right, so let's get, by tomorrow night would be the official deadline. So if you still have any questions, just let me know. I'm glad to help. So the description for Empirical Project 2 is up. It's it's less. I think it's only 4 questions. It is a statistics project. We'll be doing some math. Now, I show you we're gonna actually learn how to do this today in Excel. But again, this is there's gonna be
tables, and you're going to be reading output from software and interpreting it. So I would say it's probably about the same, if not a little more work this time, but half as many questions. So it's just a few key objectives you're trying to do, but because it's a little more complex, it's going to take a little bit longer per question. But again, but it'll be the same. Just to keep things simple and to stick with what you are familiar with, we're going to use that same data. Right? It will still be in the opportunity atlas. I'll pull it up really quick. So the idea in the second project is to take, if you did the extra credit thing, you would you had maybe a hypothesis that you were thinking, and and the idea was to do some correlation. So this we're going to be more formal and download actually five variables of the kind that we think are relevant. I think there's another one, or there's like two in here that actually don't work according to the papers we're reading. So hopefully you'll find that, that the ones don't work, and the ones that should work. But we'll find it when we get into it. We'll find out. But the idea is to take a look at these different things that might explain household income as an output, and then do some statistical analysis to find whether this is actually working. Up to this point, it's been a lot of, let's look at the maps and see which things go with it, kind of based on eyeballing it, which is fine. But to get to the next level, you want to do some formal analysis. So we'll learn how to do a little bit of that today.
Now, is that actually due before the one that has to do with the political and moral?
Oh, sorry. So that project, I helped you through that, but that project is in the old version of the class, so I dropped that one in favor of these other two.
Oh, okay. So you say you dropped it completely then?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep. So you don't have to do it. I mean, you can. I'll grade it.
No. Good. I'm glad I talked to you about it first before I started doing research.
Yep. So I think there was a two slide description of that project in the version of the slides of today that I had uploaded initially, but
Okay.
they are not in the slides today because.
So we're doing this one, then we have the home price data.
Yes. Yep. Also, I think so. I know I've been sort of teasing the central bank simulation. So we are effectively we're going to drop that. I was sort of talking about trying to make it a little easier. So today I have a really a simplified little. Basically, we're going to turn it into an in-class exercise today and just sort of get the same experience, but without all the work of running it, the full-blown simulation. Mm-hmm. And that just for the sake of making sure that the amount of effort is appropriate for the credit load of the class. Mm-hmm. So we'll get to try out what I was getting at with that central banking thing today.
But we're not going to do that as a deliverable. We'll just do it as an in-class exercise.
So we'll do project 1, project 2, the in-class exercise, and then the house price data.
Yeah, and I would not write this. The in-class one is just part of your participation grade. It's not going to be points. So
Okay,
just
so
delete them.
3
Yeah, and I guess in house price data, don't forget you also
present.
present.
Yes.
So that's like
Oh, I'm not trying to minimize it.
oh
I'm
sure
trying
sure
To be clear.
yeah. So 3.5, right?
Right, yeah, yeah.
1, 2, 3, and then you present the third one.
Okay.
So 3 and change, I guess.
And so when we present the like PowerPoint or whatever, how long?
So it's 3 slides, 5 minutes max.
Right.
So it should be quick.
The idea, that way everybody can do it. We don't have to do groups, and we can see a lot of different ideas. Plus, it's kind of like, oh, here's the fun idea I had. It didn't work, and then we move on. That's like 2/3 of them don't work. So it's easy to say that quickly, but what's neat when it does, right? And then we have some like stuff to talk about. Okay, so get that one number 1 in, then check out number 2 if you have any questions about this one. Again, let's dialogue about it. But again, right, we're in week 4. This is a 7-week class, so those last 2 will sneak up on you if you wait until. I think the project 2 is due the 7th-ish, and then the house data on the 14th. So, that's that's coming a couple weeks from now.
I don't.
I don't think I have a place to turn in project 2 yet.
Actually, I didn't even think about, I haven't turned on my project one. Yeah, that's got a place to turn it, yeah. So project two, you just want us to email it to you?
Oh no, I'll create a place online for it.
Okay.
I just haven't made the folder yet. I was pretty sure nobody was turning it in today since I just created it 3 hours ago, so unless you're really fast.
But you did post the description about project two, I mean, you put.
I did. Yep. It's up in the folder for this week because we're talking about it.
Okay, good.
So then I'll put the folder to turn it in the 2 weeks from now folder when it's due, right?
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, stuff is located where it should be if you know what I'm thinking. Yes.
In
Oh.
the syllabus, it says that project two is due on the 31st of July.
That was the ethical issue one.
Or is that the ethical?
Oh, 30%. Yeah, we're probably gonna push that.
Okay, that's what I was wondering if it's,
Yeah, because I bumped the one a little bit, so I think we'll just bump two a little bit. Too.
okay, sounds good.
All right, so let's talk about this. Oh yeah, here. So okay, and we might as well talk about this since we're talking about projects. So, and this will be very much in the style of Empirical Project 1 and 2. It's just working with a different data set. So this one is, it's actually an article from the New York Times where they got into each individual, basically I think zip code, and looked at what the house price, if you bought a house in 2007, right after the big housing collapse, or in the midst of it, and held it until I think 2014, I think is the number that they used. What did it look like? Did your house drop in value? Did it go flat? Did it go up? And you can see there's very big differences geographically. I mean, Washington D.C. I think is was like up 100% or something over that time frame. Where there are other parts of the country are like significant drops, 20-30%. And so the idea with this project is to use kind of the kind of thinking we've been doing all along to try to explain those house price movements. So the one extra wrinkle in this case is with the Opportunity Atlas, we have all those nice, the data, you're in a little pull-down menu, right? If you want to go look at incarceration rates or poverty or all that stuff, you just pull it in a menu and grab it and go. You don't have to go anywhere else. So for this one, you're going to have to go onto the internet and just kind of like Google whatever random thing you think causes house price changes and match it up with some house price data that you pull off the website. So you do a little bit of manually collecting data from the New York Times page and then match it up with data you draw from the internet and then do a correlation analysis. So you can do a regression too for that, but either way, do some simple and just connect it up. So I think I have an example, and to not give away a freebie, I picked something really dumb. So again, right? But the key here is you got to choose a theory, right? So you have some kind of idea for what you think makes some places do house price awesome and some places do house price terrible. Anybody have an idea? Like you were to guess, this is what causes these places to be really good and these places to be really bad. It's like a random thought. What schools? Like universities or K-12?
K-12.
Okay. So and let's say other words. So let's say K-12. If K-12 is really good, then people want to come there. That creates housing demand, maybe drives up housing prices. And if K-12 is terrible, people are leaving, houses fall. Okay. Perfect. So if I was going to do this as a big data project, right, I would need some kind of data on K-12 quality, which I could probably get by Googling, right? Maybe you would get it by county or by state or something. You have to do a little work, get some K-12 quality. But the idea is then you don't want an Excel sheet where it has, cities, house prices, K-12 quality, see if they match up. Okay. That would work. That'd be great. Okay, that one's claimed. No one else can steal it. I'm saying. Okay, but there's lots of other things that can do it too, right? So be creative. Now I overdid the creative. Mine is dumb. So I decided that the universe really cares a lot about whether you were a Hillary supporter or a Trump supporter in the most recent presidential election, right? And so your house price is going to vastly differ depending on whether your neighborhood supported one candidate or the other. So, does that make a lot of sense? No. And if you look at the data, this in fact doesn't work. So this is what it looks like when you do something that doesn't work, right? This is the house price change. We've got cities that are terrible and cities that are amazing. And then this is the vote share for candidate Clinton. And you can tell, right, this is like just a circle, right? If it was working, it would look like an oval of some kind, right? A squishy blob like this, or a squishy blob like this. This line here, this orange, is the best fit line. So you can see this is not working, right? So if you are a 50% voter for Hillary, your houses grew by 10%. And if you are a 75% voter for Hillary, your houses grew by 10.5 or something, right? This doesn't do anything. And that's okay, right? Your theory can be bad. It would be nice if you had better rationale than I had, right? I didn't have strong logic for this. But not every good idea actually works, right? So, but this is a good way to demonstrate whether it's happening or not, right? So if you did the same thing, say we do the K-12 education, we put K-12 education down here, we put house price here, and our line tips up. Well, now we've got a story, and we could say, well, conclusively, high-quality school districts led to large positive price changes, and the opposite. Yep. So just the extra challenge for you guys will be just grabbing that data from somewhere. Right? You gotta go out and do a little footwork and get something that you can then connect up with the house changes. Okay? All right. Any questions? Feeling like it's achievable, maybe?
Yeah, on the number 2 and on this is like the math and creating how we do the charts and all that.
Yep, we're going to talk a little bit about that later today.
Good.
Okay. Well, good. Okay, everybody pause for 4 seconds. Think of your happy place. Good. I know they're, yeah.
The one thing that I want to make sure about, I'm just thinking about this as you were giving your talk, because I'm currently renting an apartment, but I mean, I know depending on economic impacts in different communities, I mean, it can kind of affect, whether more people will decide to rent, versus buy their home.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or, whether they're renting a home or whether they're renting an apartment or buying a home or whatever. Is this solely, are we supposed to be focusing solely on houses, or if we wanted to do something, I'm just thinking out loud, if we wanted to do something potentially that would have to deal with
You could
people.
look at like the housing prices compared to like percent of people who rent or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, the only reason because I just thought, because I'm more, not that I'm saying these projects always have to be about me personally, because that seems pretty egotistical, but
Yeah.
I mean, but I just thought could it potentially have something to do with rent versus.
Sure, okay, well, I'll answer 2 different questions. I'm going to pretend you asked 2 different things, and I'm going to answer both of them.
Okay. All right.
So version 1 is, can I do this project on rental rates instead of house price rates? Absolutely. So the challenge to that is now you got to get 2 different variables, because I don't have any freebie data for you on rent.
Right. Yeah.
But, if you're willing to do it, engage, right? Go nuts, I'll love it. Okay, so that's question number 1. Question number 2, maybe, is can I use rental data like percentage of homeowners that rent or ratio of rent to home ownership costs as a variable to try to explain house prices? Absolutely, right? So that's a separate sort of thing that you didn't ask, but what that we're kind of getting at is that you can potentially, right, if rental costs are much different depending on where you live, that could feed into what homeownership, the demand for homeownership, and therefore house prices. And I was shocked, right? These are vastly different depending on where you are in the country, right? So like, okay, if you live in La Crosse, if you could, like, okay, so my house, I have a 4-bedroom house, 1,900 square feet. I got it for $150,000. So my mortgage, all in, including taxes, insurance, and everything, is $1,200, right? So if you want to rent a 4-bedroom house in La Crosse, you know what it costs to rent a 4-bedroom house in La Crosse in a nice neighborhood? I mean, maybe it's not bad, but it's not $1,200, right? I mean, your rental rates are going to be significantly higher than your home. And again, and it's not free money, right? As a homeowner, I have had to replace my heater, and I've had to replace my, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like I'm making money on this deal, but, right, the renter rents for significantly more than a mortgage would be, and then the homeowner is on the hook for all this stuff. And that just, if you think about the universe, it kind of makes sense. It probably roughly balances out, right? Close to it.
Well, and of course you're gonna be.
Yeah.
You gotta have things you're fixing and all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
that.
Well, like, and so I, right, I moved to Sacramento. Right, my house in Sacramento it was a little bigger, but we paid, it was like $2,100 to rent it. So it's like, but again, California, right, you think, okay, well, you pay more in California, right? So it's $2,100 to rent my California house. But my mortgage, had I purchased it, I mean, it was like a $460,000 house I was living in, right? So a mortgage payment on a $460,000 house is a lot more than $2,100, right? So, right, who's the idiot that's paying, right, they're like paying $3,000 to get $2,100 back and then pay to fix stuff, right? Like, how does that make sense? Well, there's a way to make it make sense, but compared to Wisconsin, that's different. You would never want to do that on La Crosse. You'd be crazy, right? So this rent ownership difference is actually huge depending on geography, right? So you pay a lot more to rent than to own in La Crosse, just cutting checks every month, and you pay a lot less to rent than to buy in California, cutting checks. And so maybe that explains home price changes, right? It's possible that that's true.
No, I mean, thanks for talking about that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. So before we get into this real quick, let's have a brief just sort of recap discussion. So remind me, based on our lecture last week. So interest rates, right? So what sort of things make interest rates high and low and stuff? We sort of talk about that a little bit, but let's make a menu.
It's gonna deal with the supply and currency in the economy, right?
Okay, sure. Okay, this is important. Supply. Okay, so we're going to go with supply and demand for currency, all right? So, if the demand for my currency is high, what is that going to do to the price of the currency?
It's gonna go up.
Yeah, it should go up relative to other currencies, right? And so think about this in terms of debt, right? If I have a dollar denominated loan of $1,000, right? If the interest rate, if dollars become more valuable, then that bond is going to become more valuable. Now the payments will also be in dollars, so that gets a little goofy, but in general, we can think about if there's a lot of demand, that's going to make the interest rate go down, right? Because people would be willing to, right, it's kind of like, well, do I want to get paid in monopoly money or do I want to get paid in dollars? Well, if I get paid in dollars, I'll accept a lower interest rate because I'm getting a valuable currency and not something that's, depreciating. Right, so supply and demand for the currency does affect interest rates, for sure. What else is going to get into there?
Government programs.
Sure. Okay, so what kind of government programs might do it?
Well,
So you're right.
like maybe Fannie Mae might affect, insurance. Maybe if like the federal government is insuring something.
Oh, yes. So I'm going to make, okay, so yes. risk is kind of the big picture story, but government programs have a lot of effect on risk. For example, I mean, you'd have to be crazy to like make an investment portfolio out of undergraduate student loans. Like that would be like the dumbest thing ever. Except, right, they're guaranteed. So suddenly, oh yeah, sure, whatever. This is like AAA fun stuff, right? So, right, because I mean, outside of the government guarantee, it's unsecured loans in large amounts to young people without income current. Right? So that doesn't sound like a good proposition. But when you take away the ability to discharge in bankruptcy and you take away the ability to default and you put a guarantee, it's sort of like you tack enough nastiness onto the borrower, it can make sense to the lender, which is really what we did. So yeah, but in general, there's tons of different risk factors that feed into interest rates, and the government policies can affect those significantly. So that's a great one. What else could drive interest rates around?
Stock market?
This is a which way does causality go? This is a question, right? So when do interest rates make stock prices change, or do stock prices make interest rates change?
Yes.
It's kind of a little both, right? But definitely it's true, right? When interest rates are high, right? Let's think about it this way, right? If I have a stock that pays me 10%, right, and bonds pay me 1%, well, this is like kind of attractive, right? But if the bonds pay 8, well, what am I doing in the stock market then, right? I wouldn't do it. There's no reason to put up with all this risk to get basically nothing, right? So when interest rates get better for bonds, automatically, right, interest rates should get better for stocks. This gets a little bit weird. I mean, stock prices it's like so much voodoo and witchcraft and who knows what. A lot of psychology, right? You do not want a psychologist in charge of your bond portfolio. They will not be helpful. You actually want a Berkeley physicist. Those are who they hired to do that. But they go and get finance PhDs after their Berkeley physics PhD. And then you can say, well, why in the world would you get 2 PhDs when you already got one for Berkeley? And the answer is because you don't want to teach high school. So yes, but again, if the stock market's hot and people are buying them, that drives money out of the bond market, which increases bond interest rates. So yeah, it's sort of, there's a lot of, they feed each other and it's complicated. Yep, so we'll put it in the list. All right, any other good ones?
The stock market's been hot recently, and the bond market hasn't really changed very much, right?
Let me think. So, all right, if you go over the last 20, there's like never been, I don't know that there's ever been a better financial market in the history of ever to be in than in the long-term bond market over the last 25 years, right? So bonds have been incredible over a long time frame recently, right? Now that said, will that continue? Well, who knows, right? Probably not.
And S&P just hit 3,000, but the bond market is still super low. Like hardly anything out there unless you're going really crazy.
Right. Yeah. Anytime. Right. Again. Right. Don't forget, when interest rates are high, bonds are low. So anytime interest rates go up, bonds get beat up, and we've had historically low long-term rates. Right. Mortgage rates. I mean, they're not the lowest they've ever been, but they're still really low. Right. So if you're doing 30-year loans, you're still doing okay. But the short-term stuff is like bad news, right? We were at 0 for a long time, and now it's like 2.5% for a month loan to the federal government. That means those prices are really low.
Yeah.
So short-term bonds is bad right now. So yeah, and when bonds are bad, then money flows into the stock market, and then when bonds are good, or when they're going good, that money flows around between those markets for sure.
How does inflation affect interest rates?
Oh, great. That's a great question. Let's think about it really simply. What if I have a $1,000 loan that pays a $50 interest rate. Okay, so let's measure that in Big Macs, right? How many Big Macs am I getting every year with my $1,000 loan?
What's the game cost?
10.
Okay.
They're about $5. I mean, they're maybe $3.80, but you want to get the fries and Coke with it, so we'll do value meals, right?
Go 10.
So 10 value meals, right? Okay. So now what if we have a bunch of inflation and the Big Macs value meals are now $10 instead of $5? Well, now my $1,000 loan is only getting me what? I'm not just being silly here. They actually use the Big Mac index to measure inflation globally, right? So we're now at 5 value meals. So in practice, even though I'm still getting my $50, right? In practice, I'm now only getting half the value out of my investment, right? So let's say it's time to do this again. Well, I'm not going to do this again, right? I'm not, right? It's not worth.
You want to get your 10 value.
Right, I want my 10 value meals, or I'm just going to buy a bowl of this, or whatever, right? So when it comes around again, I'm not going to want $50. I'm going to want $100 so I can get my 10 value meals, right? So inherently, right, again, because there's a supply and demand factor going on for loanable funds, right? If I'm willing to lend it out, I better be getting my stuff out of it. So what that means is automatically, basically by construction, inflation drives up interest rates. Because you have to compensate the lenders.
Because you're not, you're, what you're earning on that servicing that loan is not getting you the return that it once did in accordance with what it could earn.
Yes, exactly. And it's approximately true that you just subtract them. That's not perfect, but it's really close. So if my inflation is 12%, well, my loan better be 15, or, because then I'm getting 3. And that's it. If you think about, right, back in the 80s, when we had inflation in the U.S. of like 12%-ish during periods, right? And so mortgage, right, you wanted a mortgage, it was, up in those kind of rates for a while there. So inflation directly causes increases in interest rates. But nominal ones, there's this distinction, right, between nominal and real. So you maybe are only getting, right, in this case, our $1,000 turns to 10 value meals, and with the higher rates, it's still only 10. So there's some amount of real gain I get from investing this that tends to be more stable. It changes too, right? So maybe, right, this could maybe be 11 or 9, right? It might shift a little bit, but the dollars might change drastically depending on inflation. But the real rate, like how many value meals I'm getting, how much stuff I'm getting for my lending, depends on the supply and demand of loanable funds too, right? So if we've got, they talked a long time about there being a global savings glut, right? So the baby boomers have been coming through and are now approaching retirement, right? And so they have a lot of retirement savings. So there's a whole bunch of retirement savings in the financial markets. That means there's a lot of supply of loanable funds, of investable funds. Large supplies mean lower, right? That's all trying to chase the same returns. So that tends to drive down interest rates, right? You have a whole bunch of supply, same demand, lower the rates. And so real interest rates have been low because there's been a ton of funds in the financial markets because of the baby boom generation. And that's a worldwide phenomenon. That's just not in America. I think it's stronger in the U.S. We had a much stronger effect there, but yeah, inflation will have a much bigger effect. All right, any other ones? Yeah.
War?
For sure. Okay, what would war do?
Well, weren't you talking about last week how when we were in World War II, interest rates skyrocketed?
Yeah, right. So in World War II, we need money. We need it to build planes, build boats, build munitions, right? So there's a huge demand for loanable funds. And so to induce a greater supply of loanable funds, you got to change the prices. So interest rates go up, more people are willing to lend, and then, right, so you get higher interest rates, more lending, more borrowing for the war, and off you go. So yeah, war has a tendency to create a lot of debt and create a lot of interest for future generations, right? To receive and to pay. Yep. Put in the list. Okay. Why are we bringing up all this stuff? Well, because, right, there's a tendency to think that the one and only one thing that affects interest rates in the United States is the Federal Reserve. And in a way, that's true. They get to wave their magic wand and decide what it's going to be, kind of, for some of the interest rates. But, I mean, Ben Bernanke, after he finished his stint as chairman and was, able to talk publicly about what it was like, was very candid about the reality being that they don't really have the power to just do whatever they want, because the market, the market forces that are setting these rates, all the stuff interacting over there, is going to work against whatever they're doing if they're trying to push things away from where they're naturally supposed to land. So to some degree, their role at the Fed, even though they're picking those rates, right? They're trying to pick the ones that match the current global climate with all of these factors mixed up and balanced out and stuff. So the idea there, I mean, his, I guess, perception of the Federal Reserve's role was to create these artificial rate targets so that it was appropriately matched to the economic climate for the time. So now we'll get into how the Fed sort of dictates all this different stuff, but understand that in many cases they're dictating it to be what it ought to be if it was just sort of left to its own devices a little bit. Yeah.
Well, one thing that you talked about, not to get into it, but you're talking about how you can have foreign investors that will invest in currency and, vice versa, you can invest in foreign currency. And I mean, now with technology, I mean, you could do all that stuff back, 20 or 30 years ago or even before, but now with technology, I mean, it makes it, much easier. Would that have any type of, the fact that it's now easier for more people that would potentially have been able to do that stuff, 20 or 30 years ago, and they can do it now because they have more knowledge because of the internet. Would that have any impact potentially on these interest rates? Because now the U.S. economy has to always be more cognizant of the other economies that people can choose to invest in.
Yeah, I mean, so let's say, right? So let's say America has so let's say we invent the internet and have this huge, cool economic thing that generates a ton of productivity the world over and does a lot of stuff, right? And there's millionaires everywhere from stock options. You get this huge, big economic thing, right? So, absent this technology factor you're thinking about, right? You've got a whole bunch of Americans that suddenly have a whole bunch of money that they're not going to eat it today, right? They're not going to go spend it all on truffles, right? A lot of this is going to get saved, right? So then you have a whole bunch of money that is going into the savings market, and absent any type of global or even cross-state lines integration, you would expect to see really low interest rates in the environment where all that money showed up, right? And high interest rates elsewhere. And for a long time, that's how it worked. So I mean, my buddy does real estate research, and he looked at the banking system with the housing crisis, and you can see right in the past, states, individual locales had fairly separate individual banking systems, right? Like banks in the Midwest could be having problems, and it would be different than banks in the West where they were doing great or whatever. Like they were regionally distinct. And in fact, banking regulation until recently kept things very separate. So excesses of funds in one state could lead to different interest rates than in another state, and they didn't really talk to each other because it was the 1800s, and you had to ride a pony to do stuff, right? And you're really going to lend money when it takes 3 days to get there, right? I mean, there were barriers, right? And so in the past, you'd get these vastly different economic environments depending on the locale, and that would affect the interest rates in those locations. Well, now with this technology, we know what the rates are in London, we know what they are in Shanghai. So if I come into 10 grand and I want to park it somewhere, it doesn't have to stay in the State Bank of Richland Center. I can go to Shanghai with it, right? So if Richland Center is paying me a terrible rate, I don't have to go there anymore, right? Which means this whole planet becomes financially integrated, and when there's an Asian currency crisis, a whole bunch of money might flow to the Bank of Richland Center because it's the best spot for it to be suddenly, right? And they don't know what's going on. They just know suddenly they're getting a bunch of CDs, right? So yeah, there's this. The technology piece ends up meaning we are a lot more globally integrated, and crises cascade and all sorts of stuff like that.
Well, there's markets for everything.
Everything.
Like the technology allows you to trade all sorts of random stuff.
Yeah,
That has nothing to do with creating productivity.
directly. Nothing directly to do with creating productivity. Yes, that's totally true. Yeah. Okay, great, awesome, thanks. So, let's take a break. We're at 7, so let's come back 7:10, walk it off a little bit, and we'll get into how the American Central Bank makes some of this stuff happen.
I'm glad you talked about that one project not being due, because I did do a little bit of research with that, and I was curious, we were talking about the Bible Belt, and tithing and stuff. And actually, what I found in the limited research that I did is you were right. I mean, the states that had the highest percentage of tithing, a lot of them were in the Bible Belt. I mean, you have Alabama, you have all the southern states, but the one state
Or restarted.
you might actually know because you've actually lived there, but the one state that was number one that beat them all and isn't even in the Bible Belt.
I'm guessing Utah.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting, and that's why,
Yeah.
I mean, you said it's not even that the project, but I looked at that a little bit. It said that part of the reason that Utah was so high and kind of an anomaly compared to everything else was just because of the religious